There's no justice left when you play by the rules. Governments are busy defending the fools. I don't have to tell you that humanity now hangs in the balance. We can all feel the rise of the powers that would seek to enslave us. An epic battle between the forces of good and evil is beginning. But fear not, for the acceleration of the efforts of the New World Order operatives indicates their realization we are turning the tides. The NWO now realizes they are losing the information war.
We are in an information war, and we are losing that war.
I have heard the call of the Info Warrior. Having taken up the arms of knowledge, we now begin an assault against their weapons of mass deception, infiltrating and utilizing their own systems of control and propaganda against them. The Info War is now in high gear. Welcome, freedom fighters and Info Warriors alike, to this special first edition of the freedomradio.org Freedom Files. This will also serve as my entry into the Infowars.com reporter contest. Thanks for tuning in. This episode we will be talking about the signing into law of House Resolution 347 by President Barack Obama on March 8th of 2012. This bill is frequently touted as a slight rewrite of a short trespass law originally passed in 1971. This being Section 1752 of Title 18 in the U.S. Code titled Restricted Buildings or Grounds. The revisions, though, may be far more than slight when interpreted by the police and courts, and since this bill is plagued by the all-too-familiar vagueness of wording, which history and present-day events will tell us, that whenever we leave room for the interpretation of the specificity of a law, it will most likely be interpreted in such a way as to allow the broadest addition of power and authority over us by those in charge, whether it be the police, courts, the Secret Service, or some other federal agency. Now, the reason this is such an eye-opening story for me is that not 20 days prior to the signing of this bill into law, my wife and I attended the Ron Paul is the Choice of the Troops March on the White House, which under this new law would most likely never have been allowed to happen. And if we had chosen to go on with the event in spite of the law, which I feel many would have, we would have most likely been arrested or at least dispersed by some form of crowd control, such as the much-loved combo of tear gas and baton beatings, which is truly sad because it was one of the most powerful things that I've ever witnessed in my life. A shining example of the beauty of peaceful assembly and dissent, stating a strong opinion while causing no disturbance whatsoever or any harm to anyone. A testament to the purity of the intentions of the active duty and veteran soldiers which were in attendance that day. Which causes me to wonder, where would this country be without the First Amendment? Well, first off, we'd probably still be a colony of England, since our forefathers certainly would have never and did not stand for such offenses. Strangely enough, the likelihood of Mr. Barack Hussein Obama ever becoming President of the United States would have been nil. As a main component of the civil rights movement, which rightfully restored the rights of African Americans and women, a main component of that was the right to peacefully assemble, the right to protest. And even then, participators were beaten and jailed and even killed for standing up to their superiors. So what do we expect to happen when we actually have a law on the books that states that it is illegal to do something such as carrying a sign of protest at a political rally? This new bill goes far beyond protecting officials from assassination, as has been frequently stated as the bill's intent. In fact, Michael Mahassey, the communications director for Representative Thomas J. Rooney, who sponsored House Resolution 347, called the backlash a whole lot of kerfuffle over nothing. This doesn't affect anyone's right to protest anywhere at any time ever, which is beyond laughable to me, since the bill specifically mentions aspects that were present at the protests that I recently was in attendance of. So what we have here is just another step at closing the jaws of the New World Order around us, disallowing even the smallest display of dissatisfaction with the tricksters who run our lives from D.C. Case in point, if you'll look at the video displaying on screen right now, this is video of footage that I took during the March on the White House. You'll see the soldiers standing in front of the White House right now, and as I zoom in, what is that? Perhaps could that be Secret Service agents? Of course, we know that this bill allows for any place that the Secret Service is protecting anyone to be designated as an area where you are not allowed to protest, and you can be arrested for doing so. So I would say to Representative Rooney that here is an example for you of a situation where it would make this protest that occurred not 20 days prior to the signing of this law, it would make it to be now illegal. And that is why this is important to you and your individual liberty. Welcome back to the freedomradio.org Freedom Files. We are now joined by guest David Adams, the 2010 campaign manager for Rand Paul and also the publisher of Kentucky Progress. Thanks for coming out to see us, David.
Glad to be here.
First of all, as a person who is deeply involved in politics on a regular basis, on a daily basis, what would you say, if anything, about the restrictive nature of this new law?
It's very troubling. There's a legitimate purpose for new laws, essentially to right a wrong. Mm-hmm. I don't see that this bill actually rights any kind of a wrong. I believe that it traces its roots back to Gabrielle Giffords, the congresswoman who was shot in the head. Somebody walked up to her, shot her in the head. That was already illegal. This really doesn't address preventing that in any way, shape, or form. It just it expands rather dramatically the penalties for engaging in practices that really are so loosely defined that it could be anything, and that's very troubling.
Yeah, absolutely, and that brings me to my second question. The vagueness of the wording of laws and bills that have been passed recently, what does that mean as far as the ability for interpretation? What does that mean to the individual citizen when they leave this broad range of interpretation?
It's very, very bad news necessarily. Mm-hmm. When the U.S. Constitution was written, there were enumerated powers that are specific. There are very fine lines drawn, and the intent was for the government not to exceed those powers.
Absolutely.
We have, over the last century or so, moved significantly away from that idea and have allowed, through Supreme Court decisions and the law and laws such as this, to create a vagueness. And anytime you have vagueness, and the Supreme Court used to write like this, a vague law is a bad law, you throw it out. This law is vague. It's specifically dealing with the intent to impede or disrupt. I think I'm going to change my name to intent to impede or disrupt, because that's a natural human impulse. That's an American right.
Absolutely.
To protest, to disrupt, especially when we're moving so far in the wrong direction and so fast.
Also, I assume, since you are involved in Frankfurt, constantly, just to put it in perspective for people, I assume that on a regular basis there are probably people there at the Capitol building who are under Secret Service protection. Is that correct?
Sure.
From time to time. And of course that creates a situation where someone even protesting in a state, at a state level, at a state capitol, could also be,
one of the discussions I saw about this talked about the Super Bowl. It could be any football game or any public gathering. If somebody happens to show up, if Mitt Romney is someplace and you're, for heaven's sakes, if you can't think of a reason to impede or disrupt while that's going on, I don't know what's wrong with you. But
Agreed.
But again, that vagueness of activity, that vagueness of circumstance, and that vagueness of location does tremendous damage to individual rights.
Thank you very much for being on the show with us today, and I'm sure we'll have you back here again soon. Thanks for coming.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Like you've been beat to death, stand up, let me hear you scream, no justice left, no justice left. No justice! No justice left. No